Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Now on today's video we're going to talk about Enchantress on offense. We all know that she is a really annoying defender currently, and we're not going to get into any of that today. We're just going to talk about how she performs on offense. This is going to be a very simple video. Just so you know the background, I recently pulled her from the Titan, took her straight to rank 2 unduped, and as you may know, she is pretty bad in short fights like battlegrounds, offense. You would never want to use her. She just feels totally unramped and like a total noodle. However, in medium length fights or sort of like pain content, and then certainly in Evers content, I do think she has some uses. So we're going to experiment a little bit with her just on 2 fights. The first one is going to be Eternity of Pain Hercules. This is like 800,000 health with some asks in terms of gameplay and utility. It's not just like one of those fight dummies. And then we're going to look at the Red Goblin in Necropolis, which has over 9 million health, and kind of see how she does there. How much is her range as a rank 2? Would the dupe help? Things like that. I'm going to give you commentary as we go along, but I will tell you ahead of time, I do actually think that she could use a little bit of help on offense because I'm finding myself wanting to use her. She is extremely fun. She has an amazing mechanic with the spells and everything, and just the designer did an absolute incredible job just like coming up with this really creative offense and defense scheme. So I really do think she's an amazing character. I'm just curious what the data is going to say because my hunch after doing all this testing is that she is going to come in just a little underwhelming as an attacker, even in the spots where she's supposed to be hitting the mark, and she may actually get an offensive buff. So I know that's kind of a weird thing to say because most people are talking about nerfing her on defense, but when it comes to the defense, she is a puzzle to solve, and I do feel like on her own she isn't that bad. It's just kind of the same problem as Serpent, where there are certain node combinations like node 14 in Alliance War where she's an absolute menace. There really is no good way to do that without just like power back boosts and just like praying that everything works out and the RNG works out. I have to take her there all the time on Path 5. It's kind of an annoying fight. So I do admit there are some pain points in the defensive kit, but I do think today we're mostly going to focus on the offense. And with that, let's roll the clip. This is going to be the Hercules boss in Eternity of Pain. So before we get started, I'm just going to say there is some essential watching before you get into her, and that is DLL's Spotlight in Context video. It was so good. It taught me everything I needed to know about this character, and it's linked in the description. Now, looking at this fight, it is only 800,000 health. And, you know, there's certain utility in this fight that she has that is going to make this a little bit easier. It has the recharge node, which means the primary way of gaining power is when we hold block. However, she does have the power steal and things like Mystic Dispersion that will be feeding the power meter. So we are able to gain power without doing any like crazy blocking. And then the other thing, we're not able to nullify the buffs off of him, but we do have access to an atrophy. And you'll notice his buffs, the indestructible and the unblockable, those do get paused when you are far away from him, but as soon as you get close, you can see the atrophy putting in the work and just making them expire nice and quickly. Now, in a lot of senses, you want to have equilibrium with this character where you have, you know, the equal amount of all 3 types of spells, but I'm finding there are certain fights where we don't actually even need any of the defensive spells. First of all, he has True Sense, so having like a miss spell isn't really going to do anything. And then the Levitate one, yeah, it gives you regen on block and it gives you the ability to not get knocked down on the final hit of a special, but we don't really have any threats in this fight that are going to need any of that. So in my head, before I started this fight, my game plan was, what if we only focus on purple and orange spells? So we're only doing the atrophy. This is like my game plan ahead of time. I thought about this. With her, you always need to kind of come up with a game plan. And we're going to do 3 atrophy, working on the last one now. And then, you know, I could have chosen any of the damage sources. They're more or less the same amount of damage, but I'm going with the Cold Snaps just for the sake of choice. I don't know. I went with Cold Snap, which also has a little bit of a Frostbite passive on it, so it has a burst as well. And now we're just going to see what happens if we're sort of partially ramped here with 3 and 3. When we throw our special 2s, we get an attack bonus. It's only about half of the maximum attack bonus that you'll get, but the effects that we get for having all these orange ones is a little bit of extra crit rate. So you could see that most of the hits of the special 2 did crit, which is pretty awesome. And then additionally, we will refresh all of our spells because the purple one is also at 3. They are tied for the highest number. So in doing this, we saved a little bit of time because we only had to use 6 special ones instead of, like, in your head you're thinking, oh man, I got to use 9 or 12 in order for her to be a good character. But in a fight with this size health pool where I don't really need any of the defensive utility, we are only doing 3 and 3. Every time we do so, we apply 3 cold snaps, 3 frost bites. They're increased potency. When we do it with the special 2, we get the attack bonus, and then we also get an increased potency atrophy, which is going to be working for, you know, the buffs in his actual kit, as well as that indestructible and unblockable. And then, like I said at the very beginning, we have access to more types of power gain due to just like Mystic Dispersion and the power steal and things like that. So overall, she's just a very good counter for this fight. It's not the hardest fight in the world, but I just kind of wanted to show, you know, she's not one of those characters where you need to go like all or nothing and get like 12 spells and do all this craziness. We just decided no defensive spells, 6 spells, focus on the atrophy, focus on the cold snap, and you'll see here we do knock him out into his immortality, but due to that atrophy, that thing goes away very, very quickly. That's atrophy working right there, and he goes down. So a very pleasant fight. It only took me 2 tries to get a solo like that. This is a rank 2 Enchantress, so that's kind of like that max 5-star level, unduped, so she's not even as powerful as she could be, and that felt pretty nice. So next up, we're going to test a Necropolis style health pool. This is one of the biggest health pools. It's almost 8 million. And the nodes on Red Goblin, he is sort of one of the more test dummy style fights in that he is not that difficult, but there are a couple things that are pretty annoying about him that she does directly counter. And just keep in mind, this is no synergies, this is no duped ability, and this is just her right out of the gate, rank 2 unduped. So, you know, there aren't that many champions that have the range to get rid of 8 million health before the timer is up, even at the rank 2 level. So this took me a few tries to get this down, I'm not gonna lie, because her range is kind of like almost exactly this health pool, so there is a little bit of RNG going into how it all works. So let's talk a little bit about the utility that she has here, because there actually is a decent amount. Now, first of all, Red Goblin has a power burn immunity, but not a power steal immunity, and thank God, because we really definitely need that in order for us to be gaining all this power. The other thing that is annoying about this fight, there are really 2 nodes on this fight specific to the Red Goblin, and one of them is the power detonations that happen every time he gets a bar of power, and those can be super annoying, but there are 2 ways to deal with them. The first way is just gain a lot of power and always have power to throw specials, which, being a mystic with extra power gain, that does come into play. But also, if there is a damaging effect on him, then it will basically mean you don't get the power detonation at all. And one of the options for her damage sources is shock, which he is not immune to, and the bonus effect with that shock is that it has a chance, it's a little bit more than a coin flip, that it will reapply itself. So you'll see occasionally as these shocks are about to get off that they do reapply themselves, and that just means there's a little bit more uptime, especially when we get fully ramped. There's just like always going to be shocks on him, and we won't have to worry about the power detonate at all. Now, the other thing is, if you're too aggressive, if you're too close to him, then he is going to be gaining these little goblin charges. I don't remember exactly what they're called, but they basically feed some things about his kit, and it reduces your combat power rate. But fortunately for us, we don't rely on combat power as much as we do these mini power steals on our mediums and lights, and just stuff like Mystic Dispersion in general in order to gain power. So we actually don't feel that at all. And then the other thing is there is some block penetration on this node. A lot of people forget that, right? But especially toward the end when you're getting rooted, if you're blocking specials, it can get pretty ugly. But you'll see once we get fully ramped up, she has a heal on block mechanic. And then finally, the last thing is that she can just capitalize on champs having buffs. It's going to feed her power gain. We have access to both a full-on nullify aura, kind of like Sorcerer Supreme, but we also have an atrophy. So that means, you know, if we're not nullifying the buff, one of the ones that actually has duration is going to end a little bit closer when we do atrophy. So now the sort of magic number for what we're looking for in a fight with this health pool I found is about 5 of each of the spells. I can go into what I just set up because this is quite a long fight, so I have a long time to talk. So if you didn't catch everything I did, I'll kind of back brief you on what I did. But you do want to see 5, 5, 5, 5 on all the colors in this type of health pool. You know, you could debate maybe a little bit more could help, but essentially once you get past 12 total spells, your attack bonus, just like the raw attack that you get on the special 2, caps out at 12. So if we're going to go above 12, and in this case when we have 5, 5, 5, that equals 15, there should be a pretty good reason. And in this case, it's because Necropolis really likes that damage over time. A lot of the best ways that you can do damage in the Necropolis with this style of enraged timer is having debuffs ticking away while the opponent is throwing specials, while you're throwing specials, while you're in the middle of a striker or things like that, because the Necropolis timer will pause during that time. So the reason I went with the shocks is twofold. First of all, like I said, for the power detonation, there's always going to be some kind of dot on him, and I don't have to worry about like the cold snap going away and it being a frostbite toward the end, because we're going to have all these refreshes based on our RNG. But also I wanted something ticking away during the timers. It just means more damage overall. And you know, again, they're all kind of interchangeable. The incinerate, well, he's immune to incinerate, but the incinerate, the shock, and the cold snap, they all are about the same. It seems like there's a poison off of one of his synergies with Lady Deathstrike that does a little bit more damage than all of them. At least at first glance, it seems like it's a little bit more powerful. So you'll notice MSD recently made a video a couple days ago that also used that synergy, and because of that, I think he was able to get this Red Goblin down a little bit faster than I did. However, in this case, we're just using your base kit, and that's why I decided to stick with the 555 and to go with the shock. All right, now in terms of the other utility in the fight, for me, the main purple that I wanted was the nullify, because every time we nullify one of his buffs, notice some of them are indefinite, so it is nice to have nullify versus atrophy for the most part. We want to have that active just because it feeds Mystic Dispersion, gives us more power. The more specials we throw, the more damage we do, and the more often we can pause the timer, etc. Now I did have one atrophy at the very end. I made sure if I did 5 nullify that I remembered to do 1 atrophy in there, because it does help occasionally if your nullification aura is sort of like toward the end of the cooldown and then there's an indefinite buff, it'll just make it go a little bit faster. What we don't want to do is neutralize. I think there's very few scenarios where you really want to neutralize, because in this case we want the buffs to actually exist to give us power, right? Now, in terms of all the green spells, there's really only 2 that I care about, so I just made sure that I got at least 1 of all of them as I was building up to 5. Now, I could have done all 3, honestly, and it wouldn't have hurt anything, but I really like this etherealness, which is the untouchable. It's a small chance to miss. It can be a little bit of a safety net, and it also means when he throws his special 2, there's a chance, like if I miss the evade or something, that the miss can actually save me. And then the really big one is the levitate spell. I love that spell. I think it is the most powerful of all the green ones. What it means is any block damage that we take, a portion of it is going to get regenerated. And then the final part of that is that it also prevents us from getting knocked down, and it gives us an evade on a hit that would knock us down, which in this case, when he throws the fire at us with his goblin glider on the special 2, it means that we will get like an automatic evade essentially, so that we don't get knocked down. So just again, if we do mess up, that will help us a little bit. So now we're basically cooking. Like, her style is just build up however you want. Like, you do have to memorize the spells or use the spell book and things like that, and then you just throw special 2s. And we're trying to throw a relic as much as possible to deal with this timer. And then the other thing is, if we accidentally go red, there is a chance that you can chain a heavy to your combo, which will special lock your special 2. That also works if you do the second hit of your heavy attack, you can special lock the special 1. So she does have that feature where if you're like really paying attention and you get too much power based on what you want to do, you can utilize the heavy. It's the same style as America Chavez, where it will connect to your actual combo, but you can utilize either the first or second hit of the heavy to get the bar of power that you want. So all of this awareness is going on in her head. It just takes a lot of concentration. But once you get everything built up, like I said, it's mostly just baiting the special 2s. And you can see we can fully block There's an example of going, you saw us there go 2 red bars of power, but then, you know, by connecting the heavy, we were able to get a special 2 off. So just so you could see that. But, you know, essentially, we are trying our best here to not get hit, because there is one problem with her, and this is something that I would love to see get a little bit eased up a little bit. If you get hit by any hit of a special attack, when you have more than 9 spells, you actually lose everything. And I'm actually not a fan of that at all. It basically means, like, if you've spent all this time building up and you get hit, you lose everything, all of the spells, and you have to start from ground 0. And there really aren't a lot of champs like that who are like, if you make one mistake, you lose everything. I mean, obviously Aegon a little bit with the combo, but he has ways to bank his combos so that that's not really going to happen. And like even Proxa Midnight, like she doesn't lose her prowess and things like that. Like once she completes the missions, they're just fully there. And even someone like Kate Bishop, like it's possible for all of her stuff to fall off, but she doesn't lose all 5 dialed in all at the same time. So in my opinion, I think one thing that I would change about Enchantress is get rid of that clause about just like losing every single spell if you get hit with 1 hit of a special attack, because, you know, things like unblockable specials exist, and especially in the Necropolis, you know, this is one of the easier fights, but if you wanted to bring her as your clearing champion and there was this risk of getting hit by like a single attack of a special attack and just losing everything, that would be a little bit of a drag. Now, in terms of other things that I'd like to see change a little bit about her, this is obviously a blast. It took us a while to get here. We've had a lot of hits in order to get here. We're sort of cooking with gas, and we're barely gonna make it. Like spoiler, we're actually gonna lose the enrage timer, and I'm gonna have to go into overtime and throw a special 2 to kill him. And I almost thought that this try was gonna be a total waste because I wanted to get the solo on footage. So, you know, if this is her bread and butter, I love it. I love the long ramp and everything, but what it essentially does is it makes her pretty useless in like any short form content. Like there's no reason that I would ever grab her for fights unless if there was specific utility and it was like maybe 800,000 to 1 million health minimum to want to even use her, because she's really fun. Like I actually had a blast learning her and memorizing all the spells, and like she feels like an absolute god when she's ramped up, right? Because like she's regenning on the block, she can't get knocked down, she's missing, you're regenning. I didn't even talk about this yet. There's a huge life steal that you get from having the green ones maxed out. We talked about the other effects, right? How she gets the crit increase, she gets a higher crit rate, she additionally gets like all of her spells refreshed. Well, when the green is also the highest one, you get this amazing life steal. So anytime anything bad would happen in this fight, including all the block damage and stuff, because I'm just tanking stuff in the block, doesn't matter. We've got this life steal, it's keeping us alive. She feels super, super powerful. It's kind of like exactly what you want to see in a mystic like this. I just think, I remember when Shuri first came out, she had a similar feeling. The ramp up took forever. It seemed really impractical. You could get to like 99 shocks and it was absolutely crazy, but they sort of brought her ceiling down and they made her ramp a little bit shorter so that she could work in short and medium fights. And now Shuri, if you spam special 1s, is actually pretty good for Battlegrounds attack against Domino and things like that, because they gave her some ways to make the shorter fights a little bit more interesting and fun. So I'm curious with Enchantress if there's a way on attack to make the ramp a little bit slower, or like make you have some of this damage a little bit earlier, and then maybe make her cap just a little bit less or something like that. I don't know. It's tough to say, because I like the idea of a limitless champion who can just keep going more and more spells, and like you could have like 10 versions of the shock debuff on them or something like that. I mean, you could just keep going until you get to like 99 shocks, I think. But at the same time, it's like I don't feel like I'm going to be grabbing her off the shelf and using her that often, because it is so specialized at these big fights, or like the pain fights, if she happens to be the right champion for it. I personally am going to try to force her into as many situations as possible, because this to me is really fun. Like I had a blast just playing her and just feeling like a master of the mystic arts. Like that, they absolutely nailed that. And you can see here this ending got a little sketchy. I actually just ran out of my charges, so I need to figure out how to land an intercept and hope that this special 2 kills him, because we're in the unblockable phase. I don't think I have those specials in the root unblockable. So you want to talk about her range, man. Her range at rank 2 is exactly this health pool, because we made it to the very end of the enrage, barely made it, and then got him finished. But it took 12 minutes, right? The Kates, the Shuris, they're doing fights in a lot faster than that. So I'm just curious, like, how can we tweak her a little bit so that she's a little bit faster in this type of content, also a little bit more usable in the short content? How do you do that? I'm not a champion designer, but my gut says that she does need just a little bit of help, and I think people will start using her more often if there was just a slightly less ramp, if you could get to something nice a little bit earlier, and then she could still do those sort of Everest fights and all that stuff. And then the last thing, like I said, I would change it so if you get hit with a special attack, you don't lose everything. You just lose like one of every spell. So you go down from like 12 to 9. If you get hit twice, you go down from like, you know, 12 to 9 to 6, things like that. So it does still hurt, but you don't like feel like you have to start all the way from square one again. So anyway, let me know what you thought of this video. As I mentioned, check out DLL's. He has an amazing talk down of all of her abilities, all the context, how they all fit together. It's how I learned to play her. So you should watch that video. And I'm also going to link MSD's video because he showcases the Lady Deathstrike synergy and the poisons, which seem to be doing more damage because he got this same fight down in like 10.5 minutes. So definitely compare the two fights and see why that one was a little bit more efficient, and we'll move on from there. Thanks for checking out this video, and I'll catch you in the next one.